Imagine it's 2019, you're a project manager in Austin, Texas, 34 years old, combined household income of $142,000. You should be fine. You have a 3-bedroom home in a decent suburb. 2 cars, both financed. Your daughter attends a private elementary school because the public options felt inadequate. Your wife works in marketing. You take 1 international vacation per year. You eat out twice a week. You have a retirement account somewhere that you haven't checked since 2016. On paper, you are the definition of financial success. Your parents never made this kind of money adjusted for inflation. You went to college, got the degree, climbed the ladder. You did everything right. And yet, every month, money arrives. And every month, money vanishes. Not into savings, not into investments, not into generational wealth. It just disappears into subscriptions you forgot you had, into car payments that feel permanent, into a kitchen renovation you financed over 36 months, into daycare costs that rival mortgage payments. You're not struggling, you're not starving, but you're also not building anything. You're running on a treadmill set to exactly your speed, and you can't figure out who keeps increasing the incline. Now here's what nobody tells you. This isn't a personal failure. This is a system functioning exactly as designed. What I'm about to walk you through is not a listicle about cutting your coffee budget. This is a forensic examination of how modern consumer economies have engineered a lifestyle architecture that extracts wealth from the middle class in real time, often without them ever recognizing it's happening. This isn't theory. It's documented history, and it's documented accounting. Once you understand the mechanism, you cannot unsee it. The 12 signs I'm about to explain aren't just red flags. They're fingerprints, evidence that a specific economic trap has already closed around you. Let's begin. To understand how lifestyles secretly drain wealth, you first need to understand how wealth is actually measured. Not displayed, measured. Most people confuse income with wealth. This is the foundational error. Income is what flows into your account each month. Wealth is what remains after years of accumulation. They are not the same thing. A surgeon earning $400,000 per year with $1.2 million in debt, a $1.4 million mortgage, 3 car payments, and 2 children, in private school may have less net worth than a school teacher earning $58,000 who paid off her modest home in a low-cost town, drives a used Honda, and has quietly accumulated $380,000 in index funds over 20 years. This is not hypothetical. The Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances consistently reveals a counterintuitive distribution. High-income households frequently carry higher debt-to-asset ratios than moderate-income households. The lifestyle required to look successful in high-income brackets often consumes more than the income itself. This is the first pattern to recognize. The appearance of wealth is often the absence of it. And this brings us to the first sign. Sign 1. Your housing cost ratio has crept above 33%. In 1960, the median American household spent approximately 24% of gross income on housing. This included rent or mortgage, insurance, taxes, and basic maintenance. By 1990, that figure had risen to 29%. By 2023, in major metropolitan areas, housing costs for middle-income renters averaged 38% to 44% of gross income. For homeowners who purchased after 2020, the figure frequently exceeds 40%. What happened? 3 forces converged: wage stagnation relative to asset inflation, zoning regulations that constrained housing supply in economically productive cities, and most importantly, the cultural redefinition of adequate housing. In 1970, the average new American home was 1,500 square feet. By 2022, it exceeded 2,500 square feet, despite the average household size shrinking from 3.1 persons to 2.5 persons. That is 66% more house per person than 2 generations ago. This is not shelter. This is lifestyle. And lifestyle does not compound. It consumes. The mechanism is simple. Every dollar spent on additional square footage is a dollar not invested. Over 30 years, at historical market returns, that delta represents hundreds of thousands of dollars in foregone wealth. Most people know their monthly mortgage payment. Very few have calculated the opportunity cost of choosing a house at the top of their approval range, rather than one below their means. The bank approved them for that amount, so they spent it. That's the trap. Sign 2. You lease or finance vehicles within a year of purchase. The automobile is one of the most efficient wealth extraction tools ever deployed against the middle class. Not the car itself, the financing structure. Here is the pattern. A household purchases a new vehicle with a 5 or 6 year loan. Interest accumulates, the vehicle depreciates. At year 4, they trade it in for a new model. The remaining loan balance is rolled into the next loan. The cycle repeats. By the 3rd or 4th vehicle, they are financing $45,000 to drive a car with a trade-in value of $28,000. They are perpetually underwater. They call this a car payment, as though it is as fixed and immutable as gravity. Historical context helps illuminate how unusual this is. In 1965, the average car loan term was 24 months. buyers expected to pay off vehicles quickly. By 2023, the average new car loan term exceeded 70 months, nearly 6 years. Meanwhile, the average new car price rose from $2,600 in 1965 to over $48,000 in 2023. Adjusted for inflation, the 1965 price equals roughly $25,000 today. The modern car costs nearly double in real terms what it did 60 years ago, and buyers are financing it over 3 times as long. This is not transportation, this is debt architecture. The monthly payment culture has completely severed the relationship between price and affordability. Buyers no longer ask, "Can I afford this car?" They ask, "Can I afford this payment?" Those are entirely different questions. One leads to wealth, the other leads to perpetual extraction. Sign 3. You cannot state your net worth within 10% accuracy. This one is almost universal. And it is diagnostic. Ask someone their income, and they'll tell you to the dollar. Ask someone their credit score, and many can recite it from memory. Ask someone their net worth, and the room goes silent. Why? Because net worth is the number that reveals whether all the other numbers are working. And for most households, they're not. Net worth is assets minus liabilities. Everything you own that has value minus everything you owe. It is the only number that tells you if you are moving forward or backward. And yet most households don't track it. Not monthly, not annually, not ever. This is not an accident. The financial services industry profits from income throughput, not from net worth accumulation. Banks earn interest on loans. Credit card companies earn fees on balances. Retailers earn margins on transactions. Everyone profits when money flows through your accounts. Nobody profits when money sits still and compounds. So the system never trains you to measure the one number that matters. You are trained to check your credit score, which is a measure of how reliably you service debt, not a measure of wealth. A person with $400,000 in available credit and $385,000 in balances can have an excellent credit score. They can also be functionally insolvent. The ignorance is structural. It is not a personal failure to lack financial education in a system that deliberately avoids providing it. But the consequence is still yours. Sign 4. Your recurring monthly obligations exceed 50% of take-home pay. This is the pressure point where the trap reveals itself. Add up the following: rent or mortgage, car payments, insurance premiums, minimum debt payments, subscriptions, memberships, utilities, childcare, tuition, and any other obligations that recur every month regardless of whether you consume anything new. Now divide that sum by your net take-home pay. If the result exceeds 50%, you have lost control of your cash flow architecture. Your future self is already committed before your present self receives the paycheck. This is what economists call obligated income. It is income that is legally or contractually committed before it arrives. The higher the ratio of obligated income to total income, the less discretionary capacity you have. And here's the dangerous part. This ratio tends to rise silently over time. No one signs up for all their subscriptions on the same day. No one finances all their vehicles in the same month. The obligations accumulate gradually, each one marginal and justifiable in isolation. $8 here, $45 there, $120 that you'll cancel next year but never do. This is the boiling frog phenomenon applied to cash flow. Historical comparison is instructive. In 1950, the average American household had a mortgage, possibly a single small consumer loan, and no recurring subscriptions beyond perhaps a newspaper and a magazine. Monthly obligations were simple and few. Today, the average American household subscribes to 4 streaming services, 3 software platforms, 2 membership clubs, a gym they rarely visit, cloud storage, identity protection, meal kits, and at least 1 subscription box they forgot they ordered. None of these existed in 1985. All of them feel mandatory in 2024. This is not inflation. This is lifestyle inflation. The cost of living has risen. But the cost of the life you think you need has risen faster. Sign 5. You have no liquidity, buffer beyond 30 days. The Federal Reserve's annual report on household economic well-being consistently reports that approximately 35% to 40% of American adults could not cover an unexpected $400 expense without borrowing or selling something. Let that sink in. Not $4,000, $400. This is not a statistic about poverty. This statistic includes households earning well above the median income. It includes professionals. It includes 2-income families. It includes people with retirement accounts they cannot access without penalty. What it reveals is a liquidity crisis hiding behind an income facade. Liquidity is not wealth. Liquidity is access. It is the ability to convert assets into cash immediately without loss. A retirement account is wealth, but it is not liquid. A home equity line is access, but it is debt, not savings. A credit card is emergency capacity, but it carries interest. True liquidity is cash. Cash in a savings account, cash in a money market fund, Cash that requires no transaction, no approval, no penalty to access. And most households have almost none. Why? Because liquidity pays nothing. In an environment of low interest rates, holding cash felt like losing money. So households stretched into illiquid investments, or worse, into consumption. They optimized for a return or a lifestyle, not for resilience. Then the emergency arrived, and they discovered that income is not the same as access. This is the mechanism. When liquidity is absent, every disruption becomes a debt event, a job loss, a medical expense, a car repair, a family emergency. Without liquidity, each of these becomes a loan, a credit card balance, a payment plan, and each of those becomes a monthly obligation that raises the obligated income ratio. The spiral is mathematical. It does not require bad decisions. It only requires the absence of a buffer. Sign 6. Your lifestyle expanded within 12 months of your last raise. This is perhaps the most insidious mechanism of all, and it has a name: lifestyle creep. Here's the pattern. A household earns a raise, a promotion, a bonus, or a new job with higher compensation. Within 6 to 12 months, their expenses have risen to match, often to exceed. The raise was $14,000 per year. Within a year, they have upgraded their apartment, leased a newer car, added a subscription service, increased their dining budget, and begun shopping at a slightly more expensive grocery store. The net improvement to their savings rate is zero, often negative. They are now earning more and saving the same, or less. This is not greed. This is not poor discipline. This is social signaling encoded into economic behavior. Economists call it the Duesenberry effect, after James Duesenberry's work in the 1940s. He demonstrated that consumption patterns are not set in isolation. They are set relative to peers. When income rises, households do not simply save more. They adjust their reference group. They begin comparing themselves to a wealthier cohort, and they adjust consumption to match. The suburban family earning $90,000 compares themselves to neighbors earning $120,000. The family earning $120,000 compares themselves to colleagues earning $180,000. Each cohort feels slightly inadequate, slightly behind, regardless of absolute income, so raises get absorbed, bonuses vanish, windfalls become lifestyle upgrades. This is why lottery winners frequently go bankrupt within 5 years. It is not stupidity. It is the same mechanism on an accelerated timeline. Income expanded, reference group shifted, consumption followed. The money never had a chance to compound. The only defense is deliberate allocation, deciding in advance what percentage of any income increase goes to savings versus lifestyle, and executing that decision before the psychological adjustment begins. Almost no one does this, because almost no one was taught to. Sign 7. You make purchasing decisions based on monthly payment, not total cost. This is the fingerprint that reveals whether you are operating inside the debt architecture or outside of it. When a salesperson asks, "What monthly payment are you comfortable with?" they are not helping you budget. They are extracting the maximum possible price by disguising it across time. Here is how the mechanism works. A buyer walks into a dealership. The sticker price is $38,000. They hesitate. The salesperson asks their budget. They say $500 per month. The salesperson runs numbers, extends the term to 72 months, adds a warranty package, adjusts the interest rate. Suddenly, the total financed amount is $44,500, but the payment is $499 per month. The buyer agrees. They feel they won. They did not win. They paid $44,500 plus $7,400 in interest for a vehicle worth $31,000 by the time they pay it off. They paid $51,900 for something that will be worth $22,000 if they're lucky. But it fit the monthly budget, so it felt affordable. This psychology is now universal. Furniture, electronics, mattresses, dental work, veterinary bills, HVAC systems, everything is offered on payment plans, and every payment plan is a wealth extraction machine. Historical comparison. In 1970, consumer credit outside of mortgages and auto loans was minimal. Furniture was paid in cash. Appliances were saved for. Layaway existed specifically because people would not buy things they couldn't afford. By 2020, buy now, pay later. Services processed over $100 billion in transactions annually, often for purchases under $200. Young consumers were financing sneakers and skincare. The normalization of debt for consumption is complete. The system no longer needs to convince you that financing is acceptable. You arrive pre-convinced. That's the trap. Sign 8. Your savings rate is below 15% of gross income. Let's do simple math. Assume you begin working at age 25 and intend to retire at 65. That is 40 years of accumulation. Assume a real return, after inflation, of 5% annually, which is historically reasonable for a diversified portfolio. If you save 10% of your income consistently, you will accumulate roughly 120% of your final annual income by retirement, enough to fund perhaps 5 to 7 years of expenses, depending on withdrawal rates. That is not enough, not even close. If you save 15% of your income, the math improves to roughly 180% of final income. Better, still tight. At 20%, you approach 250% of final income. Now we're in range of a 20 to 25-year retirement if you are careful. At 25%, the numbers become genuinely comfortable. The median American household saves approximately 4% to 6% of gross income when retirement contributions, emergency funds, and other savings are included. At that rate, the math does not work. There is no scenario where 5% savings rates compound into 30-year retirements. None. The arithmetic does not permit it. This is not opinion. This is constraint. The constraint is mathematical. Either savings rates rise, or retirement ages rise, or retirement standards fall. Those are the only three variables. And yet the entire lifestyle architecture of the modern middle class is designed to prevent savings rates above 10%. Housing costs are too high. Transportation costs are too high. Childcare costs are too high. The obligated income ratio consumes everything before savings can occur. The system does not have a bug. The system is the bug. Sign 9. You have optimized for comfort over optionality. This one is subtle, and it may be the most important. There are two ways to allocate marginal income. You can optimize for comfort, which means spending on things that make the present more pleasant. Or you can optimize for optionality, which means preserving resources that expand future choices. A larger apartment is comfort. A savings account that allows you to quit a toxic job is optionality. A new car is comfort. A paid-off older car is optionality. A vacation funded by a credit card is comfort now, paid for by reduced optionality later. The distinction matters because comfort is visible and optionality is invisible. You can see a nicer apartment, you can feel a better mattress, you can taste an expensive meal, but you cannot see optionality. It lives in a spreadsheet. It exists only as potential. So people systematically overspend on comfort and underspend on optionality. They are trading futures they cannot visualize for presents they can experience. And then the future arrives. A job loss, an illness, an economic downturn, a family crisis, and suddenly optionality is the only thing that matters. And it's gone, spent on comfort years ago. This is why high-income households often have less resilience than moderate-income households. They have more comfort. They have less optionality. When disruption arrives, their lives collapse faster because there is no margin. History provides the evidence. The financial crisis of 2008 did not destroy the poor. The poor were already at the bottom. The crisis destroyed the leveraged middle class. Families with large mortgages, 2 car payments, private school tuition, and no liquidity. They had optimized for comfort. The system collected on the debt. Sign 10. You use credit to maintain consumption levels during income disruptions. This is the moment the spiral begins. A household experiences a temporary income reduction, a layoff, a medical leave, a business slowdown. The responsible response is immediate expense reduction. Cut discretionary spending, pause subscriptions, reduce consumption to match reduced income. But that is not what happens. What happens is the credit card comes out. The logic is seductive. This is temporary. Income will return. We'll pay it off next month. No need to disrupt the kids' activities or cancel the vacation we already booked. This is how reasonable people become trapped, because the income disruption extends, or another one follows. Or the debt from the first disruption reduces cash flow, which creates vulnerability to the second. And now they are servicing debt instead of building savings. They are paying interest on last year's consumption while this year's consumption continues. The spiral has begun. Historical precedent, this pattern is not new. It is, in fact, the exact mechanism that drove the 2008 consumer credit crisis. Households had been using home equity lines and credit cards to maintain consumption levels despite stagnant wages throughout the 2000s. When asset values collapsed and credit lines were pulled, the consumption floor vanished, spending fell, defaults rose, foreclosures followed. The triggering event was a mortgage crisis, but the underlying condition was a decade of debt-funded lifestyle maintenance. We are now seeing the same pattern repeat. Consumer credit balances in 2023 exceeded $1 trillion for the first time. Delinquency rates are rising, and the consumption economy depends on continued borrowing to sustain demand. The question is not whether this is sustainable. The question is when it stops. Sign 11. Your children's expenses exceed your retirement contributions. This is the silent killer of middle-class financial security. And it is almost impossible to discuss because it triggers immediate emotional resistance. Here is the mechanism. A household has children. The children have needs. The needs are real. Education, healthcare, activities, enrichment, safety, all legitimate. But somewhere along the way, the needs became wants, and the wants became obligations, and the obligations became identity. Private school is not a need, it is a choice that may cost $15,000 to $40,000 per year per child. Money that, if invested for 18 years at historical returns, would have compounded into $500,000 to $1.5 million. Elite travel sports are not a need. They are a choice that may cost $5,000 to $15,000 per year for coaching, travel, equipment, and fees. Money that buys a competitive advantage for college admission that statistically does not materialize for 97% of participants. These are not criticisms of parenting choices. These are observations about financial trade-offs. And the trade-off is this: every dollar spent on child enrichment is a dollar not compounding toward retirement. And, unlike child expenses, retirement cannot be financed. There are no loans for being 70 years old with no savings. The historical shift is dramatic. In 1970, childhood expenses outside of food, shelter, and clothing were minimal. Children played outside. Sports were community organized. Education was public. The cost of raising a child to 18 was a fraction of today's figure, even adjusted for inflation. Today, the USDA estimates the cost of raising a child to 18 at approximately $310,000 for a middle-income family. That figure does not include college, and it does not include the lifestyle inflation that many families layer on top. What it also does not include is the opportunity cost, the retirement wealth that those dollars would have become. This is the constraint. You cannot fund both a maximalist childhood and an adequate retirement on a median income. The math does not permit it. One will be sacrificed. Most households sacrifice retirement because retirement is invisible and children are present, and then the future arrives. Sign 12, you have normalized your financial position by comparison to peers. This is the final sign, and it is the one that locks all the others in place. Here is how it works. You look around. Your neighbors have similar homes, similar cars, similar lifestyles. Your coworkers take similar vacations. Your social circle eats at similar restaurants. Everyone seems fine. So you conclude that you are fine. You are normal. Your debt is normal. Your savings rate is normal. Your lifestyle is normal. But here's what you don't see. Your neighbors are also broke. Your coworkers are also one layoff away from crisis. Your social circle is also financing their lifestyles with debt they don't discuss. The normalization creates a false sense of safety. If everyone is doing it, it must be okay. If everyone has car payments must be reasonable. If everyone has $12,000 in credit card debt must be acceptable. This is the herd walking toward the cliff together. The fact that no one is panicking does not mean the cliff isn't there. Historical comparison is instructive. In the lead up to every major financial crisis, there was a period of widespread normalization. Before 2008, everyone had home equity lines. Everyone was refinancing. Everyone believed real estate only went up. The behavior was normalized because it was universal. And then it collapsed, universally. The error is called social proof. We assume that widespread behavior is correct behavior. It is a useful heuristic in stable environments. It is catastrophic in unstable ones. The financial environment of the 2020s is not stable. Consumer debt is at record highs. Savings rates are at record lows. Housing costs are at record unaffordability. And interest rates have risen faster than at any point in 40 years. The peer group you're comparing yourself to is not a model of safety. It is a cohort of vulnerability. And when the disruption arrives, you will discover that normal was never the same as secure. Now that we've cataloged the 12 signs, we need to step back and ask the essential question. Why? Why does the lifestyle trap exist? Why is it so effective? Why do intelligent, educated, hardworking people fall into it by the millions? The answer is structural. The modern consumer economy requires consumption to function. GDP growth depends on household spending. Employment depends on consumer demand. Corporate profits depend on consumer purchases. Tax revenues depend on economic activity. The entire system requires you to spend. But wage growth has been stagnant in real terms for most workers since the 1970s. Median household income, adjusted for inflation, has grown slowly, if at all. The purchasing power of the middle class has not kept pace with the cost of the lifestyle the middle class has been sold. So how do you maintain consumption when wages stagnate? Credit. Credit fills the gap. It allows households to consume beyond their incomes. It sustains demand when incomes cannot. And it transfers wealth from future consumers to present creditors. This is not conspiracy. It is mechanism. It is the logical outcome of an economy that requires growth, voters who demand stable living standards, and corporations that need revenue. The financial system profits from the gap. Mortgages, auto loans, credit cards, student loans, personal loans, buy now, pay later, paycheck advances. Each of these products exists to bridge the chasm between stagnant incomes and expanding lifestyle expectations. and each of them extracts a fee for doing so. The lifestyle trap is not a failure of the system. It is the system. We must be clear about who bears the cost. It is not evenly distributed. Upper-income households have access to assets that appreciate, real estate and supply-constrained markets, equity compensation from corporations, investment portfolios that compound over decades. Their income may fund lifestyle, but their wealth grows independently. Lower-income households have fewer lifestyle expectations. To begin with, they are often excluded from credit markets. They cannot fall into a trap they were never allowed to enter. The middle class bears the full weight. They earn enough to qualify for credit, but not enough to escape its necessity. They have lifestyle expectations, set by comparison to the class above. They have obligations, families, children, aging parents, that constrain their flexibility, and they have been told their entire lives that they are doing well, that they are successful, that they have made it. Meanwhile, the compounding of wealth happens elsewhere, in private equity, in venture capital, in inherited assets, in carried interest and capital gains. The middle class trades labor for consumption. The upper class trades capital for ownership. That is the divergence, and it is widening. Here is the uncomfortable truth. The system cannot correct itself without crisis. If consumers suddenly stopped spending beyond their incomes, demand would collapse, recession would follow, unemployment would rise, the political consequences would be unacceptable. If wages suddenly rose to match lifestyle costs, inflation would spike, or corporate profits would fall, or both. The economic consequences would ripple outward. If credit markets suddenly tightened, consumption would fall, housing would crash. The financial consequences would be systemic. Every exit is painful. Every correction is a crisis. Every unwinding is a cost. So the system continues. It continues until it cannot, until the debt burden becomes unserviceable, until the next disruption exceeds the capacity for credit to bridge, until the generation that was promised comfort realizes that comfort was borrowed from their own futures. This is not pessimism. This is pattern recognition. Weimar Germany continued printing until the currency collapsed. Argentina continued borrowing until the default arrived. Greece continued spending until the creditors intervened. Systems do not self-correct when self-correction is painful. They continue until external force imposes the correction. The external force is always the same. Math. Let's return to Austin, to 2019, to the project manager with the good income and the vanishing wealth. He's still there, still earning, still spending, still believing that the next raise will be the one that finally creates margin. It won't. Because the lifestyle will expand to match, because the obligations will creep upward, because the reference group will shift, because the system is designed to capture every additional dollar before it can compound. He's not a failure. He's a participant. He's playing a game whose rules were written before he arrived by institutions that profit from his participation. The 12 signs are not failures of discipline. They are symptoms of design, the housing that consumes too much, the cars that never end, the net worth no one tracks, the obligations that expand silently, the liquidity that doesn't exist, the raises that vanish, the payments that obscure total cost, the savings that never reach critical mass, the comfort that replaces optionality, the credit that sustains consumption, the children who consume retirement, the peers who normalize precarity. Each of these is a mechanism. Each is functioning as intended. The question is not whether the system will correct. The question is whether you will correct before the system forces it upon you. This is historical and educational analysis, not financial or investment advice. The patterns are documented. The math is verifiable. The conclusion is yours to draw. But history suggests most will not act. Most will continue. Most will normalize. Most will discover the cliff only when they reach it. And the system will continue to function as designed, because the system does not require your awareness. It only requires your participation. This channel exists to examine the mechanisms before they finish operating, to study the autopsy while the patient still breathes. Most will never see these patterns until the consequences arrive. If this analysis clarified something that was previously invisible, consider subscribing, not for entertainment, for pattern recognition. Because the systems being studied here are not abstract. They are the water you swim in, and the water is rising.